Okay, this is an interesting progression of talks with having Dan speak before me, and then me kind of being a satellite of what was once a CAVE-based program. And next we're going to hear from Jurgen, who's at Calit2 at the University of California in San Diego, where Tom DeFonte and Dan Sandine work and create other systems and do other research. Welcome, Jürgen.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks. So I do fit in that kind of family somehow there. I entered the family about 11 years ago when I started working at the University of California in San Diego, and this presentation I did together with Greg Daw, who's in the audience here, and he's pretty much the one who built all of our virtual reality systems. All the hardware goes back to him. He created the CAD models and put together all the structures that hold all these screens up, as you'll see. He's also going to give his own presentation tomorrow morning around 9 o'clock, an hour-long keynote in which he's going to talk about the various projects that he's done in VR, and it's going to be very, very cool. I would love to see it, but I'm not going to be here. So the Calit2 Institute is kind of a lengthy name. It's the California Institute for Telecommunications and Information Technology. It was founded over 15 years ago by Larry Smarr, who also founded before that the Supercomputing Center, National Center for High Performance Computing in Urbana-Champaign. And he still is the overarching director of the Calit2 centers. And there are actually two locations to Calit2. One is in San Diego, that's the one I work at, and that's called the Qualcomm Institute. So the Qualcomm Institute is the San Diego division of Calit2, in case you ever wondered. And there's also a Calit2 at UC Irvine, which is called Calit2. It's Calit2 at Irvine. They haven't figured out a local name for themselves. So what we often get mistaken for is Qualcomm, the company, because that's also based in San Diego. And we have as much to do with Qualcomm as Qualcomm Stadium does, where in San Diego, where football games happen. So we're not actually a division of Qualcomm, the company. The idea of Calit2 is to prepare for a world in which distance has been eliminated. And so that has a lot to do with wireless, has a lot to do with networking, and a big part of Calit2 is visualization. There's a big visualization space in which we put various virtual reality systems, as you'll see. But there's also other work being done at Calit2, like in nanotechnology. There's a big clean room, for instance, that's used to build prototypes by local faculty and spin-off companies, and also companies around the area as well. There's a big photonics lab at Calit2, and then besides virtual reality, we also do digital cinema. We had one of the first 4K projectors in the country. I think the first one that was installed at a university in the United States back 11 years ago. And we have about 1,000 researchers that are spread about these two buildings. So that just adds a little bit of background in case you wondered what Calit2 is. But it's really, the Qualcomm Institute is a research division of UC San Diego. So I'm with UC San Diego, and I'm a research scientist there, and I'm also a adjunct professor in computer science, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. First, I want to talk about the visualization systems we have at Calit2, and I should mention that Tom DeFonte, who came up in Dan's talk, is one of the founders with Dan of EVL in Chicago. He is the founder of the visualization activities at the Qualcomm Institute. He started there maybe 13 years ago or so, and he eventually hired me 11 years ago, and then we've together been building that lab with Greg and others. The first major visualization system we built in 2007, so that was almost 10 years ago, is the TourCAVE. The TourCAVE is this walk-in room-sized system. It's about 14 feet tall, and as you can see in this image here, that's the TourCAVE, and this is about 14 feet tall. There are 34 projectors that project onto the backsides of these screens. So it's a rear projected system. And this one wall here, it's 5 walls, and this fifth wall here is on wheels, it can move in to close this whole thing. It looks a little bit like an egg, and you could close it in order to have a full 360-degree system. The 360 degrees are all around, and we also project on the floor, but we don't project on the ceiling. So the ceiling's open, which actually has the nice effect that when this is closed and you're inside, that you can stay in there for a while. It doesn't get sweaty and hot like it does in some six-walled caves that I've worked in. The projection technology here is that we use passive stereo. We have 2 projectors, HD projectors per screen, and we also have 4 projectors total projecting onto the floor. That makes it 34 projectors with 15 screens around. These screens are tilted. The lower ones and the upper ones are tilted towards the viewer for better imaging properties. And also we have, because we have 34 projectors, we need 18 PCs to drive them. We have 1 PC for every 2 projectors and another one that controls them all. And that generates 70 megapixels overall. We have a 10 gigabit network between those computers. That's not very particularly impressive, but back 10 years ago, that was quite the feat, and it also took us quite a while to get these 10 gigabit to work well, because that was one of the first generations, probably the first generation of PCI available network cards with 10 gigabits. So that's the TourCAVE, and then from that point on, we only then developed VR systems that were based on LCD panels. And this is the first one that we built after the TourCAVE. It came out about 2 years after the TourCAVE, and this is Greg right here. And at first, it was a 10-screen system. We had this 3x3 array with another display at the bottom. Later on, we added another 2 columns on the sides. This is the next cave, for next generation cave. It's currently it's in its largest form. It's 17 displays. Well, these are actually 46-inch. This is wrong. 46-inch displays, and they do passive stereo, line-by-line stereo. 10 graphics PCs drive them, 41 megapixels, and a 10 gigabit network connects the nodes. This next cave is still alive, and we still use it for demos, but we don't really use it for regular work anymore because we have nicer VR systems now. So 2 years about after that, we built the TourCAVE. TourCAVE we built when large LCD panels came out, so the next cave was 46-inch displays. The TourCAVE is 65-inch displays. These are 65-inch HD displays. We have 14 of them arranged in 2 rows, and they're also tilted off to the side, so they're on edge. The reason why that we did this is that these passive stereo displays, they have very good stereo properties as you walk along them when they're in the regular landscape orientation, but their stereo isn't very good when you go up or down. So tall people and short people, children, they don't really have a good stereo view when the display is optimized for the view of an average height person. So the reason that we tilted them was that we would support all kinds of heights of people, because this was in a project with, came out of a project with Saudi Arabia that wanted to build a system for a large exhibition that they were preparing for, in which they expected families to come, and they wanted to support tall people and as well as short people. So that's what this does, is it supports all heights of people, but at the same time, it doesn't support a lot of width in terms of the sweet spot. It's a very small, narrow sweet spot that you can fit maybe 3 people that have to gather pretty closely if all of them are going to see a stereo image on all of these screens. It still is one of our nicer systems because we have a fair amount of pixels here. The bezels are relatively wide here because at the time the bezels were about, I want to say maybe 1.5 inches all the way around. And so Greg decided to overlap these screens so that we hide one of the bezels, just like we did in the next cave, in order to get a more pixel surface area compared to the bezel area. So these are 7 columns of screens. We have 8 graphics PCs driving them, 1 PC driving 2 of these displays. They're HD resolution, 30 megapixels, and a 10 gigabit network connecting them. And after that, TourCAVE was when we got a bigger grant, an MRI grant from the National Science Foundation, to build a larger virtual reality system again. And at that point, we had run out of space in the Calit2 building, so we had to resort to a different space, which we got in a new building. That's the Structural and Materials Engineering building, the SME building on the campus of UCSD, just about a 5-minute walk from Calit2. So we got a big space in there, and we built this 35 display system, 35 HD displays with 55-inch diagonal. And the real kicker here is that these displays have only a 3-millimeter bezel around them, all the way around, and they were built for signage purposes. So that's the key for this display to work so well, because we didn't have to overlap the panels, and we still have very narrow bezels in between the screens. These are also displays that are full HD resolution, and they have passive stereo with a passive stereo filter that makes it a line-by-line stereo display. It took quite a while for these displays to come out. I remember there was, for a while, they had these 720p, 720 pixel row displays out that were first came at 46-inch and then at 55. But those had the narrow bezels, but the pixels were fairly large on those. So I was really glad that we waited until those full HD 1080 resolution screens came out, because the image looks so much nicer and you can get a lot closer than the 720p displays. But then it turned out that these screens were only on the market for about 6 months, and then went off market again because no one apparently bought them. These are from LG. Apparently, display walls are made out of monoscopic screens and not stereo. And the other issue, of course, is that if you build a display wall that's flat, like they usually are, you don't see stereo very well on the screens that are above or below the center because of that stereo problem again. So here we curved the system in so that each screen, when you consider this front row of people here, each of these displays points at the viewers in that row. And that works really well. It supports 20 to 30 people at a time. And it's also a large cluster, our largest one, 19 graphics PCs. We generate 73 megapixels and have a 40 gigabit network connecting these nodes. And that was in 2013 that we built this. On the back of it, it looks like this. So that was I don't know if that was the most difficult design that Greg ever did, but I find this one of the very most impressive ones, especially with the screens up there hanging down. And we were worried about the glass falling out because the bezels are so small and thin. So we had one of these screens, we got it way in advance and hung it upside down from a couple of cables for some mounting structure, and had it hanging there to see if the glass would come out, and it didn't. So, but still, even if it did come out, it wouldn't fall on people here, but it would just fall on the bottom row of screens, and it never did, and we never had an accident like that. So these LG screens are really well built. That was the wave, and then after that came the generation of 4K displays, and there was one that we built out of 3 4K displays. We call it the TourCAVE. These are 79-inch displays on edge. They really just support one user that's in the sweet spot, but these screens go all the way to the floor, and if you sit down, you're at the perfect height, about halfway up these screens, so that you get a fairly immersive view, and it's super high res with the 4K resolution on these screens. It's a beautiful image. Passive stereo, and this is the first system that we built that has the ability of being run by just one PC. And this is where PowerPoint comes in. You can't run PowerPoint across a cluster unless you use Sage or something like that. But if you have just one PC running this, you can actually run it in Windows, and you can actually run PowerPoint on it if you really want to. PowerPoint's not why we built it, but Unity is really a big, big bonus. We can run Unity 3D on this without any major modifications or any clusterization for Unity. And that marked the first time that it was easy to get undergraduate students involved in these research projects with the fast learning curve that Unity provides, and yet them being able to do virtual reality in a meaningful way on these high-end virtual reality systems. So that was probably the major step forward for me is with these single node systems. And then the next generation up was the CAVE Kiosk that we built about a year ago or so, when we got these 4K OLED displays. These are organic LED displays, and we built this system out of 6 of them that are arranged this is 4 for some reason. It's not the one that I'm talking about then. So we have the one in our library is 3x2, and it's driven by one graphics PC with 2 GTX 1080 cards. These are very fast graphics cards, obviously, and they can drive, with one PC, can drive these 6 4K panels at the full 4K resolution in stereo, passive stereo. So that's a really, really cool system. It also is relatively single user because the screens are on edge. But the resolution is even greater. The pixels per degree is even greater than the 4K, and we're rendering 48 megapixels here. off of just one computer, and there really isn't a big problem with that. And initially I thought maybe that could be an issue with Unity, but no, Unity runs just fine. And Unity you can even program Unity to support the angles between these screens correctly so that they, when you have, even if you had a head tracker on your head, but you can, here we have a fixed viewpoint, so that the image is correctly rendered across these edges. And that was I almost didn't expect that we could do that with Unity without major modifications. So that was the CAVE kiosk, and then we also, somewhat in between, maybe around the time that we built the TourCAVE, we built this room wall, which is an 8x4, 55-inch, this isn't 3D TVs. I don't know why it says 3D. So this is a 2D TV screen that we use here. Narrow bezel from NEC, no stereo. We have 17 PCs driving this, 64 megapixels. This isn't a VR system, but we do have VR tracking there. So we have 3D tracking, so we can run 3D applications. And the bonus of this is that we have the ability to put a large audience in front of it. Up to 70 people can fit. So it's great for presentations. Here you can see it running Sage, much like EVL uses it for some conferences. We've done that, and we often use it for demonstrations. We have some custom 2D visualization applications for data visualization, information visualization that run on this wall, and it's really, really good for that. So, those are the big VR systems that we have at Qualcomm Institute. A smaller thing that I built with a little grant from the university last year is I call it the biggest student VR lab in the country, and I'll say that until someone else disproves me that it is, because we have 25 Oculus Rift workstations in this, plus an HTC Vive. And it looks like this. That was the design initially, and now it's there. It became operational in the last fall when the fall quarter started, and we've already had 4 classes that are 2 last quarter and 2 now that are using this lab. The students, luckily, I even got Oculus Touch controllers for this lab, which turned out to be a real. I was really lucky that I got those because it took me 3 months to get 25 Oculus Rifts ordered in one order. It turned out to be really, really hard to order more than 3 Oculus Rifts off of one credit card. For the longest time, you had to, on Amazon, you got up to, I think, 2 units or something like that. At the Oculus website, you got 1 at a time. It took me a while to find out that Best Buy, and convince Best Buy to actually get me an order of 25 of these. So I got that in the summer. Then we installed it, and then in December, when the Oculus Touch controllers came out, the day that they came out, I called up the guy at Best Buy who got us these 25 Oculus Rifts and asked him if we could get 25 sets of touch controllers, and he said, probably not until a few months later, but he would make a request, put a request in, came through my purchasing department in the same day that he sent us the quote. They were able to push it through the system and get it paid, and get the PO out, rather. And so he was able to actually put that through. And he said, had I called 1 day later, it wouldn't have been possible because they then limited the amounts of orders of these touch controllers. So I was very, very lucky to get these. And in this lab, we also have 25 Leap Motion units. They're very cheap, and they go on the fronts of the Oculus Rifts to do gesture recognition. We have a couple of 3D OLED TVs, a Vive, a HoloLens to loan out to students for projects. We have 40 Merge VR viewers. These are Google Cardboard-style viewers, but they're very indestructible. So if you think about Google Cardboard viewers for your class, they're $80, so not quite as cheap as others, but they really are indestructible, made out of foam, and nothing's going to fall out. They're awesome. We have 2 Gear 360 cameras and a small 3D scanner. So this is a really awesome, fun lab that I'm very proud of. So this lab, along with the Virtual Reality Club, is where we have the most student activity that's among the undergraduate population. Our computer science department is the largest in terms of student population in the country. The VR Club alone has 300 undergraduate student members from UCSD, not necessarily all computer science students, but they're all undergrads. And they work on VR projects. About 40 to 50 of them are assigned to one project or another. And the VR Club does career services. When companies look for people, they go to the club and they send out job and internship offers. They do events. and they're very well organized. That's I'm very impressed to see that. Of course, now some of you probably like me been doing VR for a decade or more. For me, it's 17 years now. It's unbelievable to see the amount of interest in the student body when it comes to virtual reality and also the availability. The club was able to get about 6 HTC Vive units through various different sources. A couple of them the students bought, others they won in hackathons. So they have 6 Vives that they now take around, along with computers that they take around on tours well, not really tours, but they go to events. They just had one the other day at a high school in San Diego, and they just love doing that stuff and spreading the word about VR. And these consumer VR devices really make that possible. So I'm very happy about the development in that direction. There's the high end that we've been doing, and now there's really the consumer end that brings this technology into the hands of the students in ways that it wasn't possible before. When you had a cave, there can only be so many students working in a cave at a time. So that's a big game changer to me. And I want to leave it at this and open up the floor for questions. Thank you.